Thanks for doing this. With especially your younger guys, this season has been so crazy, and with the number of games in a row and everything like this, how can going through a season like this help them moving forward to an 82 game season? Thanks.
Yeah, good morning, Tracy. I guess the biggest thing I will say is when you're a young player, the challenge is to try to not just get a game or two in the NHL, but you want to establish yourself as a regular player. So the one benefit we had this year was we had games essentially every other day. And once they got going early in the year, they got into a bit of a rhythm. And I think we saw some of those young players, they really performed well in the beginning. I think, you're trying to prove yourself. You're probably attention to detail is very high. You want to do the right thing. And, once you get to the middle of the season, you've played a lot more games than you normally would in a 6 or 8 week period. So I think what ended up happening was some of our guys, the term is hit the wall a bit. What that means is they probably can't find the consistency because they get worn down a little bit physically, but probably more mentally with the stress of continuing to perform almost day after day after day. You never get that break. In a normal season, you'll have a 3 games a week. Maybe you'll have the occasional week when you have 4 games, but sometimes you have 5 days off between games. So you get that time to reset. And I think that probably would help younger players a little bit more, but we didn't have that this year. So, the part that I'm happy about was the fact that we had so many young players that not only got the opportunity to get in a game or two, they played a long stretch of games consecutively. And we talked about it coming into the year that was going to be important for us to have some players step forward. And I think we had even more than we expected who came through and were big contributors.
Our next question will come from Phil Thompson with the Chicago Tribune. Phil, please go ahead.
Good morning, Stan, and thank you for this. Stan, I want to get your take on where do you think there are areas to improve if you look at shots on goal against, if you look at how at the scoring with 5-on-5, perhaps the PK. What are those areas in your mind looking back at the season, and how do you plan to address them with personnel? Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. I guess I could answer that a couple ways. The first part of it is, we need to have improvement probably across the board. I mean, there were aspects that we did well, but I think probably finding consistency, in stretches, both special teams were really dominant over periods of time. Probably didn't have the ability to stretch that out for the whole season. Our power play was I think we ended up in the top 10, but for the first probably 30 to 40 games, we were in top 5. So the power play wasn't as strong down the stretch, and the PK was kind of the inverse of that. So I think what we're looking for is more consistent. It's strange when you look around the league that it's kind of a common phenomenon, though, across all teams, where it's really hard to maintain that for a full season. There tends to be some ebbs and flows, and you're trying to minimize that a little bit. As far as goals against, I mean, that's something we want to work on as a team. We know that. So there can be a combination of, different players, also, players executing better. I think, we showed when we're on our game, we can be a really effective team. We just didn't have the consistency that you need if you want to be a top team. So, there's going to be some new players next year without question. That process is just starting right now. We finished the season a couple of days ago. We have a lot of a debrief to go on with the coaching staff, and as well as in management. That's really what we're spending our time on now, is trying to look back, assess what was good, what wasn't, and then over the next series of weeks, we're going to make some decisions about areas that we can improve. It's a little bit early, though, to give you specifics on that right now.
I know we talked earlier about some players that were having some uneven seasons, some good, some bad. I'm thinking particularly Dylan Strome and Nikita Zadorov. And if they fit into your long-term plans, and the expansion draft is coming up, you've said many times, even just now, you're not always going to have the same players on the team. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on those two in particular.
Sure. Dylan started the season pretty good, and he got hurt, and then he played with it for a little bit. We don't even know how long. And then, he came forward and said that he had a concussion. So I think, his play dropped a bit, but I think that's probably attributable to the concussion. And then he was out for a while. So when you come back, it takes some time to kind of get your rhythm and your timing. And by that point, our team had found its rhythm, and he hadn't been in the lineup at that time. So it's trying to find his spot, and you're coming back in. So I think that was a challenge, to get his consistency. I think Dylan would probably say the same thing. Like, he had stretches where he was effective. I mean, his production wasn't what it was in the past, but that's part of it, and that happens to not just Dylan, but happens to some other players. And learning to get that consistency is probably the biggest thing that younger players. I mean, Dylan's still 24 years old. He's not been in the league that long, so he's figuring that out. As far as Nikita goes, he did a lot of really good things for us. I think his issue wasn't really so much the same as Dylan, because I think maybe sometimes his role was different too. He was playing against good players often, and if you're just a little bit off your game when you're matched up against top players, that can be a challenge. But he did some really good things defensively for us. I think that's more his game anyway, is more of a defensive player, not an offensive player. Sure, I think he could have played better, just like all of our guys had moments when they weren't at their best. But it's hard to break down every player, and maybe optically it looks different. But I think he, for the most part, when he was on the ice, our team had a pretty good job. Certainly Murph was our most consistent defenseman all year long. But Nikita was in that top group of probably two or three who played a lot against good players. And he had some ups and downs, but I think, he did show some strides of progress over the year.
We'll next go to Scott Powers with The Athletic. Scott, your line is active.
Hey, Stan. Obviously, expectations were a bit tempered this year, just knowing how many young guys you were going to play. What do you see being the next step in this, I guess, in this phase? And how soon do you see, play expectations rising, returning to be a cup contender again?
Well, Scott, it's a process. We talked about that back in October before the year started, about this was a time when we were going to rebuild our roster, and we were going to give opportunities to younger players. So that was the goal going into the year. I think that was certainly a success from the opportunity that we gave and the number of players who not only got in the lineup but played prominent roles. So through that lens, it was a successful year. Now what we need to do is continue that process. It's a process. It's not a 1-year thing. It's a process that takes time. It's hard to map out the exact timeline on it, because this was a bit of an unusual season. Hopefully we're going to get back to a normal schedule next year, where it's going to be 82 games, but also spread out a bit. I think if you look back at our year, what I noticed the most was, when we played well, when we were really on our game, we could play with anybody and we could beat anybody. The challenge was when we didn't have everything going at one time, then it was hard for us. So our minimum level of performance isn't as high as some of the top teams. So if you look at those top teams, Tampa Bay, Florida, Carolina, they can play at like 70% and still find a way to win the game. And I feel like with our group, if we were playing at 70%, we wouldn't win those games. We had to be really on it with our performance. And that part of that is learning as a young player. When we have as many young players, is you have to figure out a way to, when you don't have your A game, you can't have your C game. You got to have at least a B game there so that you can stay competitive and then find a way to keep the game in reach and then get some points out of the games. I think that's a learning process for our team. That's really what I saw, what happened. So when we were playing well for that stretch, if you look back, I think everybody was really focused. Their details were good, and that gave our team a chance every night. And then when one area slipped, whether it was the forwards, the D, the goaltending, the special teams, when one of those was not sharp, we didn't have enough to overcome it. So as we go ahead to next year, your question was, what does it look like? Well, hopefully we can bring in some new players, whether they're players from within, players that we trade for, or that we sign as free agents, who can help bring that the minimum level higher. And then also we need these young players to take the next step in their career. So the first step was getting into the league, showing that they can play. Now they have to take that next step to not only be in the league playing, but also to have their performance variability to be smoothed out. And when that happens, our team's gonna have a chance to perform better.
What's the challenge this offseason cap wise, knowing that you have more than 10 million on LTI and the unknown with Toews? And I know that you've been against offseason LTI before, and I assume that's the case still, just with as many young guys as you have. How do you approach that, knowing that, I guess, an eighth of your cap, maybe more, is already tied up?
You're right. It's a bit of a challenge. That there's no question about that. But we're gonna have to deal with it. All LTI is an option for us. We'll look into that. It may be something we use. We're hoping to work it a different way. I guess the biggest thing was you don't have a lot of new contracts to sign. So that should help us from the perspective of not getting some big increases from where players were at this year. That's coming in the coming years. So it's never a solved puzzle. But we're going to work on that. Part of it's going to be if we make any changes, cap implications for players that are leaving or coming will play into that. It's probably a bit early to map that all out. We've had internal conversations on that. That's probably going to be our focus between now and the free agency opening. The draft it's a bit of a different timeline this year, with the draft being pushed back and free agency pushed back. So we have a little bit more time to talk it through, and but that's going to be dictated by what we find out when I talk to other general managers about how they're reshaping their teams and seeing which players might be available.
We'll next go to John Deep, the Daily Herald. John, your line is active.
Hey, Stan, good morning. Just wanted to ask about Jonathan Toews. There was a report, obviously, that said he's likely coming back if things continue the way they're going. Are you expecting him to come back? And when's the last time you talked to him, and how's he doing?
Yeah, I talked to Jonathan a couple of weeks ago. He's doing well. Had a good chat. We talked for about 15-20 minutes about a lot of things, our team, but just non-hockey stuff too. So it was good to connect with him and catch up. I think that's the update that I have, though, John. I don't have anything more than that. We're hopeful he'll be back, but we're just going to let it play out and we'll see. It's a bit of uncharted waters here. This situation came up and we're just kind of taking as it comes. So, when we have more information, we'll pass that along. But I don't have another update on that right now.
Okay. And then you just talk a little bit about your signing tape with Borgstrom, what you hope for him obviously next season? And then I don't know, just like who are you really looking? I know you said, you want guys to take the next step, but who are you most excited about to take the next step? That maybe he's on the current roster or other guys that are coming in.
Sure. Well, with Borgstrom, I think we've talked about him in the past when we made the acquisition. He's an intriguing player. I think he could, he could be a nice piece for us next year. Certainly, as far as his skill set goes, he's a big kid. He's tall. He's got good hands. He can make plays. Offensive type player, but pretty good instincts for the game as well. So I think it's going to be important for him to make sure he's a solid two-way player, so we can tap into the skill that he has. But he can make plays, and he can score goals and set up goals, and hopefully be another piece to complement our team and be a two-way player. So I think we're looking for him to come in and have a strong training camp and really kind of jumpstart his career. So excited to bring him in. We haven't finalized anything with Lucas Reichel, but we'd like to try to sign him. I've had conversations with his agent, but they had a really good run in the playoffs there, and now he's playing for Germany in the World Championships. So he's still got hockey left to go, but he's a player that we'd like to get over here to North America. Whether he's in Chicago or not, we'll see. But he had a great season, so pretty optimistic about his potential, whether it's next year or the year after. And then internally, we had a lot of young players we broke in. I don't really want to single one or two out to at the detriment of others, but the guys who probably played the biggest roles for us this year were Hagel up front. He became a pretty useful player for us in a lot of different situations. He was ending up on both special teams throughout the year, and a 5-on-5 player. He had pretty good success in overtime. So he did a little bit of everything, and I think we liked that. I thought Kurashev showed flashes of being a really useful player for us as well. And Kalnick came on late. I think Mitchell and Boquist and Beaudin are all there. They're all different players, and they have different skill sets, which we need. Sometimes we're going to be looking for one versus the other, and but the important thing is that they're all developing. We saw Hardman and Entwistle come in here very late, and I think they showed that they can play a role on our team, and they were pretty hungry to do it. The challenge for them is going to be to do it over a longer period of time than they had a great ending to the season, I thought. So if they can take that and extend it next year and build on it, like I said earlier, though, it's not as easy as it sounds to just because you had a good stretch for a couple of weeks that you can turn that into a 5 or 6 month strong run. So they're going to train hard and come here competitively to show us they can do it. And that's what ultimately what we want is them to push each other and then to push the other players in the lineup. So if they're coming on and showing that they're going to take someone else's role, that's going to bring out the best in others. So that's what, I mentioned a lot of players there, and there's even more who I didn't mention, but we're expecting some of those players to take steps forward.
The next question will come from Ben Pope with the Chicago Sun-Times.
Hey, Stan. You mentioned Reichel there, but just wanted to get more of your insight on the season he had, and I guess kind of his potential as a very talented player. Sure,
Ben. I think the thing that was really encouraging this year is they moved him to center. When we had drafted him, he had played wing, but they used him in the middle this year, and I think that's a great option for our coaches to have. It's too early to tell whether he'll be an NHL center or not, but I think the fact that he's got some experience there shows that he's got pretty good instincts and hockey sense. He took a nice step forward offensively, production wise. He had a good year, so that's a positive. I think you want young players to keep growing their skill set, and he plays the pursuit type game that we're looking for. He's a pretty active player. You notice him even when he's not scoring. He's involved in the play, down low in his own end, and even in the offensive zone. he's good at retrieving the puck or pressuring the puck to get it back, and then he's got enough skill to make plays. So I think style wise, he's going to fit in really nicely with our team. I think we're just going to be aware of the fact that he's just 19 years old. So, try not to I'm not putting high expectations on him. I'm singling him out as someone in the coming couple of years, I think is going to rise to prominence. It might take him a year or two, but that's okay. We like the skill set that he brings, and I think he's going to be a player that's going to help us out in the coming years.
I don't think we've gotten to talk to you since the Riley Stillman extension, but I guess what did he do to so quickly earn that in the few weeks after he was acquired, and where do you see him fitting in long term now that he has 3 years left?
Well, before the trade happened, we had studied him quite a bit, and he was someone that we envisioned being part of our group. So when he came in here, we were going to re-sign him anyway. And then as we got into those discussions, it seemed to make more sense for both sides to do a 3-year deal. And I think it was a manageable contract for us. And I think it's a good start for him to get a foundation in the league. And we like his style of play. I think especially the last few games here, I think, he and Murph were pretty steady pair for us. And he brings a little bit of everything. He's got enough skill and skating to be effective, and he's got some physicality to his game. He takes pride in defending, and he can handle bigger bodies. He's a strong kid, but I think he's got a lot of room to grow as well. I think he's just starting out here, but I liked watching his play, and I think that it's a nice, I guess, balance. We've got some other players that on the defensive side that have different skills. Certainly Wyatt's a great skater and skilled with the puck, and Bodan and Mitchell and Boquist, they're probably tilted to the skill a little bit more. So I think, you can't have everybody have the same skill set. So I think Riley probably brings something different than they all bring. I think that was something that was appealing to us.
Next question will come from Charlie Roumeliotis with NBC Sports Chicago. Charlie, please go ahead.
Hey, Stan. I wanted to ask you about the goaltending competition. I know going into the year, you wanted to give those 3 guys a shot to see what you had in them. Do you feel like Lankinen has separated himself and could be a potential number 1 starter for you guys moving forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, Kevin had the longest run of the 3 during the season. I think, he emerged as the guy that stepped forward, but I think they all had their moments. Certainly Delia was later in the year, and Malcolm had some good stretches in the middle, kind of in support of Kevin. So, that was an unknown coming into the year, how it would play out. But I remember saying early on that we don't really know at this point which player is going to emerge, or if 1 or 2 of them will. I think Kevin probably took the biggest step forward, but I'm not sure that any of them took a step backwards. I think it was great to see, Kevin take that. It was a big workload, a lot of games in a short amount of time, and his first experience with NHL action, I think he handled it well. So, I mean, we want everyone to look to be better. So I think we're going to challenge all 3 of them to step up their game. But I think when you look back at this season, I think you have to be content with the way the goalies performed.
We'll next go to Mark Lazarus with The Athletic.
Hi, Stan. Just a quick procedural question. Given how much time he's missed and his uncertain future, is it possible that Jonathan Toews will be exempt from the expansion draft?
No, that's not how it works.
Okay, that answers the question. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question will come from Nick Gismondi with WGN Radio.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Stan. As you move forward with kind of building out your roster and making the moves that you're planning on making over the summer and whatnot, I thought character was a significant part of your room this year. So how much goes into your decision making on skill versus character? You talked about not every guy being on the same skill level, obviously. So when you're looking at it, I know it's a little Herb Brooks-esque, but what's that right players versus best players kind of situation when you look at your room? your roster there.
Yeah, you're right, Nick. I think it does take a mixture of players. I mean, you certainly have to have enough skill and talent and offensive ability to produce. But I think what we're trying to do is build a team that isn't relying on its skill, and we want to try to have more of a workmanlike approach. And you can still be really offensive when you're working. I think what that brings to the table is it gives you an opportunity to compete still in the games when your skill's not prominent and maybe you don't have it. But if you have the work ethic and the relentless drive, then you can remain competitive, and that's what we need. So whether it's new players or whether it's inspiring our current players to really to build their foundation on a relentless approach and work ethic in the game, that's something that I think our team can use more of. So it can come in the form of new players who bring that naturally, or it can come from the players learning that that's a valuable attribute to their game. I think Alex DeBrincat's a great example of that because he's a very skilled player. He's third in the league in goal scoring. But I think the thing that I noticed about Alex this year is he really did bring that work ethic, and he was really noticeable at getting the puck back when he didn't have it, really working hard. It's a lot of energy. You have to expend a lot of energy to chase guys down and finish your check and get back and backtrack hard. But if you're willing to do that, you're going to get the puck more. And then when you get the puck, you can do things with it. So I think Alex was probably the best example of why it's important for skilled players to play with that too. So ultimately we want everybody to play with that type of hunger. And some players do it naturally better than others, but it doesn't mean that there's no reason anybody can't do it. And I think that's what we're trying to instill in our players. And the more guys that we get that will take that approach, I think it's going to serve our team well.
Our next question will come from Brandon Kane with NHL.com.
Hey, Stan, just wanted to know if there was any update on Alex Nylander's status for next season and whether you guys plan to re-sign him. Thanks,
Brandon. He's been really progressing nicely on his rehab from his injury. He's probably not on track to play yet, but he's back to much closer to being ready to play. So he's going to be fully healed and ready to go by training camp, and we expect him to be here. And like I just talked about, I mean, Alex has got a lot of skill, and I think he can be a real asset for us. He's a bigger kid. He's probably 195 pounds, and he's a really good skater. So we just got to get him to use that skating and that pursuit of the puck, because when he has it, he's got really good skills. I mean, I think we saw that he protects the puck really well. He can really shoot it. He can make plays, but we got to get him ramped up. And just like I described DeBrincat, there's no reason that Alex can't be that type of player as well, as a bigger guy with great skating. So, he did miss some time, so I'm sure there's going to be a bit of an adjustment, but he should be, he trains very hard in the off season. I anticipate he'll be in great shape and ready to go come training camp.
Next question will come from Mike Berman with NBC5.
Hey, Stan, good morning. How would you evaluate the job after Jeremy gets an extension in the offseason? How would you evaluate the job he did this year, and why do you like what you saw from him as you continue to look to him as the guy to build this team and move it forward?
Sure. Going back to the offseason, what we kind of talked about is our approach in the coming years. What wasn't just this year, it was really, we're trying to build back up to being a top team. And the way that's going to happen is through the development of younger players and giving them an opportunity, but seeing them take steps forward. And I think we've talked about it earlier today. I mean, we had the most games by rookies in the whole league. So I think when you look at through that lens, you can see the progress that our young players made. And maybe you don't always see it in the games, but I really was impressed with the developmental approach that our team had this year, going back to the practice days. So, every day when we would be practicing, we would spend, time before practice doing skills work with our young players. It was almost like an extension really of Rockford. So we had done that when Jeremy was in Rockford, and all the players would go out, and it became a regular thing. It wasn't something that we did once a week. It became an everyday thing in Rockford. And then this year we brought that mindset to Chicago. And I think we saw with so many young players, we saw growth, progress, and we need to continue that on. So it's got to be that mentality that we have to get better, and our veterans have to get better. Our, mid-range players in age have to get better. It really is. We talk a lot about the growth and development of young players, and that's true because they haven't established themselves yet. But even the experienced players, they all need to keep pushing to improve themselves. And I think that's something that Jeremy and his staff have embraced, wholeheartedly. They put a lot of work into it to prepare our guys, and certainly a lot of work to prepare for the actual games. Tactical preparations is important too. But it's not just that. It's really, and the payoff for what I'm talking about now, it's not immediate. It doesn't happen it's not like we do extra work for 3 weeks and then we're done and we've solved the issue. This is something we're going to do for the next years, so that we can eventually have a team with enough players that can impact the game every night.
Next question will come from Pat Boyle with NBC Sports Chicago.
Good morning, Stan. With Toews out all season, Doc out most of the way, your depth at center was certainly tested. What did you think of your team down the middle this season and going forward?
Yeah, you're right. We were challenged, Pat, right away. And I thought it was pretty impressive to see how Suter in particular stepped up. He hadn't really even played a lot of center recently. He had in his career, but in recent years he had played more wing. So we weren't even sure if he would be a center for us. But between he and Kurashev, they both, more so for Suter, but Kurashev had a turn at it as well. Phil actually the opposite. So he had always played center and he had to shift to the wing early in the year. And then we got him back playing the middle, towards the middle part of the season. So I think those two young guys really, they had a pretty big load on their shoulders to carry, and it's not easy. It's not easy to play center in the league. It's not easy to play with great offensive players like Kane and DeBrincat, who, they make great plays and they expect you to do the same. So there's that part, that expectation, and on your own mind, you don't want to let your teammates down, and you want to make plays, but then you're out there against great players. So you got to focus on the details of defending and being in the right position. And, it's a lot to put on their plate. So I think we found a way to be resilient. And I think that's a good sign for what could be in the coming years. But, we have Borgstrom coming in, who's a natural center. Whether he plays center or wing, we'll see when he gets here. But, he's had a long run at center. So we have some more options. And but that's an area that's an important part of a team. It's a little bit different than the wingers. They have more responsibilities, particularly in their own end. And when you add it all up, I think given the circumstances, we found a way to make it work.
We'll next go to Scott Powers with The Athletic.
Stan, I know Kane said he was dealing with something and might need a procedure. Do you expect anyone else to deal with anything this season and potentially need anything this offseason?
I don't think so, Scott. There's several guys dealing with injuries, and we had a few guys that weren't healthy to end the year. But I don't think we had anyone that's going to require a procedure, at least not right now.
Time for a couple of more questions. The next one will come from Chris Bowden with WGN Radio.
Hey, good morning, Stan. Thanks for doing this. After kind of investing in similar, I guess, framed defensemen in recent drafts, how would you characterize the development arc of Adam and Ian and Nicholas, and what are you seeing otherwise in Alex Vlasic so far in his college career?
Sure. We'll start with Boquist. I thought Adam, he really took a step forward this year. We haven't really talked about him much, but he hasn't been with us the last couple of weeks here with the injury, and he missed some time with COVID earlier. But I thought that stretch when he came back from COVID till he got injured, he was really effective for us. Especially probably underrated his role on the power play, his ability to, you can't always just look at how many points he scored, because a lot of the times he would make the necessary play up top, which would free up those other guys to get the goal, and he doesn't get a point out of it, but he was pretty effective. He's got a real good skill set, creativity wise. And I like the fact that he seemed to take a step forward this year, which we wanted him to. We encouraged him in the off season to think of himself as an offensive player. I think, his first year in the league, he was very young. He still is very young, but I think he was trying to survive, and that's hard to do. His best attribute is making things happen with the puck. So we gave him the green light, and we encouraged him to carry the puck, make plays, make things happen. And I think you could see it. He started to feel it, confident, take charge, make things happen. And then, he missed some time, 2 different times, he was out. So when that happens, there's always an acclimation coming back from the COVID. And, but I thought that he really was impressive. So, it's a step forward. I think his defending has improved as well. He's still so young, but he's getting better at that. But I think his attribute's going to be making things happen with the puck. And I thought he really did show that. For Mitchell and Beaudin, it was a bit different because they hadn't been in the NHL yet. So they're just trying to get into the league. Adam had that experience the year before, but I think they both had flashes where they were really effective. Mitch started early in the year, and we probably put a lot on his plate early. And then I think he kind of got his legs under him, maybe 10 or 12 games into the year. I thought he had a really good run. And then at some point he had played all those games in a row, and coming from the college schedule where you don't play as many games, I think it caught up to him. And then, he came out and we did a bit of a reset, and I think he kind of got himself back going. And, I think he ended on a good note too, with the way he was playing. So, he played more than Beaudin did overall, but I think Nick, he probably came the farthest from any of these guys. Like a season ago in Rockford, he was struggling the first month, even getting in the lineup in Rockford. And then by February of last year, he had really got his game together, and he earned a call up, played the one game, and then the season shut down. And then he took it upon himself to really train hard. I thought he took some steps, and he came to training camp and showed us that, he was further ahead than we expected, to the point where he got a number of games, and he showed a lot of poise with the puck. He's got a great patience with the puck. You can find that next play. So, they all have their strengths and their areas of growth. But I think all 3 of them took steps ahead. As far as Vlasic goes, same thing with him. I think he took a bigger role at BU, and I think he's going to be probably their top defenseman next season. He got some opportunity to play on the power play this past year. As a freshman, he didn't get that chance. He was, they had other guys ahead of him, but I think that this year he was able to play a more all-around role on their team. And he's such a big kid. He's a good skater for being so big, and he's gaining some strength. And I think that's a process that's going to take some time. But I like his combination of skills with his size and his reach and his skating. He's a pretty appealing prospect for us.
Next question will come from Tracy Myers with NHL.com.
Hi, Stan. think this hasn't been covered yet. I'm sorry, but with Zadorov, have you guys talked to him or his representatives about a new contract, or is that something that's going to happen down the line here? Thanks.
Yeah, we started that process. I think he and a few other guys we got some contracts we've got to sign. We don't have a real busy off season, but we do have a handful of guys who need new contracts, and we've engaged with the beginning stages with most of them already. So that's on the schedule here for the coming weeks, to see where it all goes.
And our final question will now come from Brandon Kane with NHL.com.
Hey, Stan, just following up on the prospects there. What do you think of Drew Camiso's performance this season? And then also any guys in Rockford that really stood out to you?
Sure. I thought Drew had a really good year. I mean, it was a strange year in college, didn't play a lot of games, but they had some BU seemed to have some COVID issues, and they were shut down at periods of the season. And I think Drew would have been on that World Junior team if it weren't for COVID. So that was unfortunate, but I know he was highly regarded, and I think he had a very good start to his college career, and I think it's someone that we're hopeful for. We have high hopes, and we're pleased with his progress to date. So I would say next year is going to be a big step forward for him. I think he's going to be their goalie, their go-to guy. As far as Rockford goes, we haven't really talked about a couple of guys. Like Reese Johnson made his debut up here, and got some games in, and he certainly brought some energy, physicality, competitive work ethic, and I thought he took a step forward in Rockford for us this year. It was really, really young group in Rockford. I mean, I had a chance to see him play the other day against the Wolves, and they had, so many young defensemen. I mean, Krutil was just drafted, and he played a lot of games, and Cole Moberg was there. Isaac Phillips had a great season for us. He was probably the bright spot among the young defensemen. He really took a step forward. I was impressed with him. And up front, we had Evan Barrett, who's first year pro, and Alti Barmakan. Those two guys were noticeable. Later in the year, we had Slavin come in, and I think watching him play, he showed some really nice things as well. So there's a lot of guys in Rockford that I thought benefited from this year. It was a strange year, not a lot of games and no playoffs in the American League. So, but they really took it to heart. And I think, Derek and Anders and Brian Campbell did a great job with them, working with them. All those players took steps forward, and I think that's what we're looking for. I mentioned it earlier, but same thing up here is we need to get better. All of them have to put in the time, skills before practice, do video after practice. I mean, it was a true developmental year for that group. But I think we're going to have a very similar group next year. Most of those guys that were there this year are going to be coming back. So there's a familiarity there, which is good. Normally, American League teams is a big changeover year to year. Some players graduate to the NHL and others go elsewhere. But I think we're going to have a lot of continuity, and I think that should help the group.